Alright, it's February 1st, 2024. In 4 hours, Suicide Squad releases public worldwide, 9 p.m. PST. The game's officially been out for 68 hours. It is 5 p.m. right now. I just felt it necessary due to overwhelmingly negative reception that I make this video. So this is my review of Suicide Squad. I've officially spent 20 hours with the game. It's been a wild ride. It's been phenomenal. I love the game. I'm obsessed with the game. And the rest of the video isn't just going to be me like this, just my face. So let's get into it. Let's start with the obvious. The first and foremost in what you experience with a video game, the graphics. The game looks great. The textures are thorough, deeply detailed where it matters, of consistent quality consistently across areas of play, and everything renders on time. The game's presentation opts for a more realistic than stylized look with its characters and its world, but the game's UI is instead video gamey and arcadey with bright popping color and hyper-oriented neon palette swatches, with each character's visual hyping indicational combo multiplier tailored to suit him or her or itself. All the weapons are just as kooky as the characters themselves, with each gun's, grenades, and melee weapons' unique personalities showcasing what brand it belongs to, and thus which brand-based perk it must have. Everything aesthetic present here in Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League has a meaningful depth to it, dictating information to the player, and just showcasing Rocksteady's takes on the flavors of the DC universe. The landscape is flavorful and filled with distinct landmarks which players can use to identify where they are. Central Business District is tall and corporate, the industrial complex at the head of Metropolis. Suicide Slums is a claustrophobic, favela-like, slum, shoot away to the edge of the map. Wonderland is a commercial district lavish with amusements, advertisements, and a retro 70s aesthetic filled with casinos and extravagant pastimes. Bakerline is a business-forward urban apartment sprawl. The Scene is a spacious, ritzy-looking living quarters for Metropolis's well-to-do, and Midtown is the kaleidoscopic, telescopic commercial district and economic heart of Metropolis, featuring businesses and banks of all shapes and sizes. And everything lights up at night. And when it comes to the cinematics, they are beautiful. There's not much more to say here that won't be mentioned in the section about story. Next, I think foremost is the auditory experience of the game, because what you hear is often just as important as what you see, considering that for most of us, hearing is necessarily an unending experience in our day-to-day lives, even if sometimes all the noise fades into the non-ground. Everything sounds distinct, well mixed, and is all delectably high fidelity.
Partners in crime?
Crispy. The city sounds ironically both dead and empty, and alive, brimming with chaos, and apocalypse, and the Devil's Foot soldiers march in your very front yard. All the non-diegetic sound, pointed distinctly to feed the player information, is comprehensive and so elegantly intuitive. By that I mean, if you've played a game before, you'll likely be able to identify just about what every sound means after hearing it just one time. Although I find the combat theme particularly underwhelming and uniconic, the way it swells and grows and the way the instrumentation evolves or devolves in relationship to on-screen tension is a hallmark of the video game medium, and Rocksteady proves they are legacy developers, masters of the trade. Yes, the music has no identity, and I could swear I've heard it anywhere in passing, but man, does it show up right on time, every time. The guns sound satisfying, and even within each weapon type, the subdivision of weapon styles each have their own bullet and reload sounds.
Heavy weapons are a great choice for you. Ammo.
Do I love that acting?
And have you seen?
And down to the characters. They are so incredibly well voice acted. The talent here all deliver a masterful track, all digitally mastered by the sound director to the fullest potential.
Even you.
That's editorializing a little, but fair.
Now the hard part. Of course, what it all comes down to the most when judging the quality of a video game is the literal game itself, the thing you play that is at the heart of a video game. And this game is a titan of fun. Let's start with Traversal. The traversal options for the characters match the identity of each character. And boy, is it satisfying to turn Metropolis into a racetrack once you've gotten a bead on the controls. Harley swings with an oomph, an eclectic weirdo energy that at its most optimal is used in short spurts to navigate the chronic gaps in the rooftops that keep you from the chaos below. Or she can fling herself to walls so she can rise to any occasion. She can also tether herself to the bat drone, allowing her to hang for a small duration. King Shark launches himself massive distances with his demigod powers, either in a distinctly vertical arc or with a far more powerful trajectory forward, and he can shove himself in a forward sweep, allowing himself to cross the chasm to the place you want to be. Captain Boomerang can sling his weapon of choice and teleport to it, enabling him to cross massive distances in a short amount of time. And this can be done twice in succession, with the second featuring half the distance payoff. With his access to the Speed Force through a gauntlet, like King Shark, Boomerang can shove himself in a forward sweep, allowing him to precisely define what he touches next. And lastly, Deadshot has a jetpack that allows him to flow massive distances comfortably without the complex button implications of the former three. And with a powerful tool, the Kickstart, he can refresh the heat on his pack to cross even longer distances. You can turn on the Afterburner to replace maneuverability and distance with speed, and as the only character who can truly hover, he can manage any vantage with ease. Overall, each character, minding Harley's severe flaws in tunnels, allow you absolute control of the most minute movements. Once you master the buttons, understand the mechanical interactions of avatar and button press, and live in the flow of the momentum at the heart of everything you do in the game, Traversal is so incredibly satisfying, which is why it's so impossible to believe that what it feeds into, the combat that makes up the core of the gameplay of the experience, is actually amazing too. This is in fact primarily a third-person shooter. Combat comes down to hitting designated zones, whether to land crits or to expose your opponent to shield harvest. Your goal is to kill everything in sight, and in order to stay alive, you have to keep your shields up by making the best of opportunities to take and make shield, either by harvesting or by exploiting specific moves or situations unlocked on the talent tree that promote your longevity, whether by reducing damage intake, simplifying the horde, increasing your durability temporarily, or simply refunding you for your shields. All encounters are shaped just like the Arkham games themselves. The game juxtaposes you to a diverse grouping of enemies with different strengths and weaknesses, and surrounded by which you are forced to make decisions on who to eliminate first, the best pathing to take to keep your health, and which buttons to push. This all sounds very simple, exactly like any other video game, but it's the formula specifically of the Arkham franchise at heart, and it all boils down to an incredibly mechanically compelling and satisfying experience of rapidly responding to your situation with the correct button inputs to then aim quickly at the correct targets, all while navigating the playground, either to avoid damage or to close in on foes. And although not absolutely necessary, this battle loop is all further enhanced by playing to the exact strengths and weaknesses of your chosen Task Force X member and the build you've elected to establish. And on top of this, the game encourages you to experiment and to try as many builds necessary to content your heart. There's no price in-game at all to changing your talent tree. Experimentation is actually encouraged here.
We have to get inside the inner sanctum.
Lastly, we get to the game structure, how the story plays out, and what you get to do in the in-betweens. Remember, this is all spoiler-free. The game structure is exactly like any other open-world game, absolutely kindred to Arkham Asylum, City, Night. You have a core set of missions to complete that comprise the story of the game, and there are a massive set of side quests for you to optionally tackle along the way that grant you rewards and assets. Of course, like an Arkham game, sometimes you have to tackle specific side missions in order to gain access to play certain story missions. The bulk of the lead of the game is a series of mandatory tutorials, first playthroughs for each side quest variant. There are a lot. I would argue 8. 10 are officially listed, although 2 of them you only do once. And as a side note, there are only 7 support quest givers who give their same style of mission over and over with minor changes and constraints. As follows, the side quests are: protect the plants, collect data nodes for the nerd by killing only the cool things, blow shit up with a flying car that's also a kamikaze bomb, domination from Call of Duty featuring a comatose nerd who only lets you do damage at bad times with melee, infinite 3 spawn points which you have to destroy all at once in order to win, save the peasants into a prison bus while you can deal no damage, refill the bug with sweet kill streaks juice, protect the van, grenade kill streak frenzy apocalypse, and 1 cold smash and grab, which you literally only do once. Whew, that's done now.
The Flash is back. Come on.
Good guy Flash, it back.
The story is contradictorily both cynical and hopeful all at once. Brainiac has launched a siege on Earth to capture and take Metropolis. He has largely succeeded. All that stands in his way is you, the last representation of any fight left in humanity that remains. And this is unconsensually. And all that stands between you and Brainiac are the greatest heroes of Earth, brainwashed into being his minions. The cutscenes are well directed, full of character flavor, comedic wit, and mishappenstance violence. Even non-cinematic in-game delivered story moments are full of personality. I could rave on and on about how each and every time there was a cutscene, there was always a silly moment, typically featuring Harley Quinn, and it always had me rolling on the floor crying. Just to mention one specifically without spoiling much of anything, a well-timed butt touch. The cutscenes are beautiful, full of detail in every shape and form, from Harley's hair details and Boomerang's clothing to the weird things characters do in the background. The facial expressions present on anyone's face at any given moment are, for lack of better words to express my point, as good as real. And story beat by story beat, in the cutscenes and outside of them in story contextualized gameplay, the story comes to a head. And the longer I played the game, the more I just wanted to know, not what the end is, but how it all goes down. Because ultimately, in good stories, it's not the plot that matters, or how it begins and how it ends, but how the minutiae of every moment happens, why empathetically we identify with these characters, and how they achieve to grow and learn, because we want to too. I enjoy the game thoroughly, even though the argument consistently being switched around is that the game is disrespectful to this specific Arkham canon or to the DC Universe characters in general. The reality is that doing bizarre stuff with iconic characters is all par for the course when it comes to comic book retcon multiversal shenanigans. Personally, I hated Zack Snyder's Dawn of Justice because it made Batman and Superman both look like idiots, not paragons of humanity. My point is, it's all free game, man. Nothing is an absolute reference, and Rocksteady designed their own special Arkham canon apart from the comics, and it's okay for them to do with it as they please. In this game, even brainwashed, I feel like Barry acted like Barry, John like John, Bruce like Bruce, and Clark like Clark. Even behind their brainwashing, the Justice League have managed to retain some semblance of their core personality traits. Barry is never on task and likes to fool around. John is a disciplined military veteran who who responds to authority without asking questions. Bruce hates the people who disobey order. And Clark is such a paragon of patience and virtue. Actually, I can't finish that sentence. The story's treatment of the Justice League only serves to heighten the threat and meaningfulness of a villain like Brainiac. Brainiac is big and scary, and this is the most terrifying he has ever been in anything, ever. And even though it's a team of 4 boneheads who take Brainiac down, there's good reason for why Task Force X becomes capable of doing it, and why each member becomes a hero who will. The bulk of the story is delivered before and after boss fights, and the boss fights were frenetic and tough, largely well-paced, unique to play when in comparison with each other, and even the core gameplay. And most importantly, they were gratifying, satisfying, and the moments they led to felt well-earned by the player, well-deserved by Task Force X, and natural for the scenario of a world taken over by Brainiac, created by Rocksteady. Comic book stories are infinitely hopeful, and there's always a way to take down the big bad. There's often no cost, and comics teach us if someone dies, they'll just return. The stakes here aren't much different. This is a comic book game after all. But for the sakes of Task Force X, you play as the ones who survive a Brainiac apocalypse by making wise decisions. It feels like they achieved something meaningful, something even meaningful beyond their own context. Even if we know there's just another Justice League out there somewhere in the multiverse. On a final note, I wanted to mention, it's a bit difficult to review a game intended for online play and interaction with other players. As for the legacy of the Arkham franchise, it's in good hands. Because the reality is, at least to me, this is a great game. Not a good game, a great game. A game worthy of the legacy of Argonaut, Rocksteady, and the Arkham franchise. As for how I feel about the game right now, at this very moment, I give the game, a 10 out of 10. February 3rd, 2024, 1:30 a.m. PST. Want to do this right, so I'm largely going to read what I wrote verbatim. I've officially spent 14 more hours with the game. There's that. And I am just as in love with it as I was when I was at the peak of my enjoyment. And although I would still seriously assign the game a perfect score by my own personal metric or rubric, I think it's incredibly important to bring up the game's technical issues on PC. Now, I don't know what causes the issue, although I do believe it has something to do in particular with NVIDIA's RTX 4000 series of graphics cards. I've endured throughout my entire experience with this game, excepting only my first and only online multiplayer session with exactly one other person, absolutely inconsistent frame rate. You see, things load on time. They look great, but I've seen dips in my frame rate to as low as 12 frames per second. That's insanely low, with the occasional frame lasting as long as about half a second. An entire half a second. I want to reiterate, I want to clarify that the issues I face with the game are only present on the PC. And although the issue is more common than idiosyncratic, feel free to look it up, the majority of players have had no problems running this game on PC, through Windows, through Steam. And although I have had significant issues with frame rate while strictly playing alone, and although the frame rate hinders my visual experience of the game, for some strange reason, the dips and stuttering and freezing have absolutely no effect on the responsiveness of the game, ever. I've been able to keep track of my targets, and have been able to do what I intended to do as I swing the mouse. You see, the game seems to be processing what I am doing, but the frames themselves just can't seem to keep up. What's also interesting to note is that the frame stuttering is absolutely gone when I played online multiplayer. I reiterate, only once ever. Suicide Squad's gameplay is best in class, and if the correct live service and endgame structures are built upon the infrastructure that the game has, the gameplay included as an anchoring experience, I am absolutely positive Suicide Squad will endure as a looter shooter, as a live service game, give Destiny a run for its money, and put to shame all the pandemic made video games that released over the last 4 years that just weren't up to the level of quality they should have been. The game is enamoring, and hopefully its kinks on PC get worked out. But ultimately, if you've wanted to play a good video game, or you were interested specifically in this game and were scared of dipping your toes, or if you're a diehard fan of the Arkham franchise and this game seriously freaked you out, this game is great, and it will more than meet your expectations. And if you're an owner of a PS5, I highly suggest you give this game a shot. Even if you own an Xbox Series X. I admit I came in as a die-hard fan of Rocksteady with the highest assumptions about the quality of this game. And I felt certain I knew what the game experience was going to be like. Yes, I was largely right. The game is great, and my expectations for what a third-person shooter could be as a looter shooter were met, but they were exceeded extremely, because I just didn't know that the feeling at the core of a Batman Arkham game could be induced in a shooter, and it can be, and that's amazing.